Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to For StarCraft 2 Strategy. Today we're going to be taking a look at a Protoss strategy. Now in this particular strategy replay, our Protoss player here is Dirge, and our Terran opponent is Rifler. Now what we're specifically looking at today, again, this is a Protoss strategy, and we're going to be looking at a good build, a good strong build, versus that Marine, Marauder, and Medevac build that a lot of Terran players, in fact many, if not all Terran players, have at least a strong understanding and capability of playing that MMM build. So this is something you're very likely to deal with on multiple levels of play, be it from the bottom of the leagues all the way up to Diamond. This is something you're very likely to come across as a Protoss player. Now what we're specifically going to be looking at is going for a 2 Warpgate build along with a Robotics Facility to get out some Immortals to deal with any of the Marauders, and then those 2 Warpgates obviously we're going to be using to warp in those gateway units. And then we're going to be looking at, as well as expanding, teching up, we're going to be looking at proper scouting techniques, how to tell your opponent's going for that MMM build, and then how to respond properly. Starting off with a little unorthodox build order, we're going for a 9 Pylon followed by a 12 gateway, 10 gateway, I'm sorry. And we're doing this specifically so that we can get that gateway out a little bit quicker, so that if we do see Reapers, if that's a possibility, which is always a possibility against a Terran player, we're going to be able to properly deal with that, since we do have that gateway out faster, and thusly that Cybernetics Core will be able to come out faster as well. Now going ahead and moving into our Terran opponent's base, trying to get some scouting information. We do see that barracks going up, and we also saw that refinery building. So pretty standard stuff thus far from our Terran opponent. Nothing too fancy as of yet. When we do have this Assimilator going down, we dropped that at 13 supply, and now at 15 supply we're going to be getting that Cybernetics Core. So again, getting that earlier gateway allowed us to drop that Cybernetics Core that much earlier as well. And that's going to allow for a faster Stalker to fend off any possible Reapers that we're going to be seeing. So moving our probe in yet again, there's really no reason to stray from our opponent's base until the point that they have a Marine, because you're really not going to have any threats up until that point. So you might as well get as much scouting information as you can up until that point. In fact, we're going to be pulling our probe here in this little corner, trying to hide it, and then moving it in a little bit later to try to get additional scouting information. Now as you can see, our Terran opponent is bringing an SCV into our base, trying to get some scouting information, also stealing some minerals. What a thieving little SCV. I think we're going to have to take him out and, you know, make them pay for that. I mean, there was no reason back in the day they used to chop your hand off if you'd steal an apple. I mean, stealing minerals, that's like stealing money. That's no good at all. So we will make him pay in the form of our Stalker here. Getting out this early Stalker, obviously fending off any scouts. This is also going to help, again, fend off any possible Reapers. Now we are moving our scout back into the base, trying to get some good scouting information. In fact, we do get some really good information. We saw that initial Marine there, and then we saw that Marauder. So we do know that the possibility of our Terran opponent going for that Marine Marauder build is very likely. I mean, we see Marines and Marauders, so we know they're at least on the board. He still has the option, of course, to teching up to different things, but we know that that's a strong possibility. Now we're going to respond in turn by dropping this Robotics Facility. Again, we saw that Marauder, and the threat of an early game Marauder heavy push is very scary for a Protoss player. So were we going for a 4 Warpgate build, it would be a little bit harder for us to deal with really early aggression from a Terran player with Marines and Marauders, even coupled with an SCV going up to do some additional damage, as well as to build bunkers in or outside of our base. So we're going to respond by getting this Robotics Facility and getting out an early Immortal. We're also, of course, researching our Warpgate research. This is going to be a fundamental aspect of any really strong Protoss build. There's really no reason not to get Warpgate research with the fact that it's in the game. I mean, back in StarCraft 1, when there was no such thing as Warpgate, everyone just built out a standard gateway, so that was great, good, fine, but we have the ability to warp in units anywhere we have Pylon power now. As Protoss players, there's really no reason not to utilize that. We're going to be chrono boosting in our first Immortal again, because that threat of an early Marauder push is so scary as a Protoss player. We do want to make sure we're prepared for it. Going to be following that up with an Observer to get some really good scouting information. I've said it before, Protoss is one of the strongest races when it comes to reactionary play, meaning that they have the highest capability of knowing what their opponent's doing at nearly all points in the game, because observers are a cloaked scouting unit. Unless they spot it and they're able to decloak it with either a scan or a missile turret, there's really no reason for you to not have a really good idea of what your opponent's doing. And yet again, I start casting a game without putting the busy thing up. I'm not quite sure what my problem is. So our warp gate research has just finished. We're going to be turning these gateways into warp gates. Again, we brought out that first Immortal, we followed it up with an Observer, and we're going to be doing a second Immortal as well. So right now, that unit composition we're looking at, it's going to be really strong versus Marine and Marauder. Immortals do incredibly well versus Marauders. And what we're going to be doing right now is moving into our opponent's base with this Observer. As you can see, our suspicions were confirmed. That initial Marine and Marauder that we saw put us in the mindset that we're might be seeing that MMM ball, and we are in fact going to be seeing that. That is confirmed right now. We just saw a heavy force of Marines and Marauders. We do see these 3 barracks right here, 2 of which have tech labs on them. We also see 2 gas coming up, so we can expect some transition into something gas intensive, whether it be Ghost or maybe he's going to be going for some Banshees. That's another possibility as well, and then of course those medevacs take gas. So we saw our opponent pushing up there, if nothing else but to kill our probe that we had sitting over there, and also making full use of this Observer. And again, this is why I feel Protoss is one of the strongest races when it comes to reactionary play, because with this scouting Observer we are able to see exactly what our opponent's doing. Now we have dropped a expansion here, and in fact it did just get scanned by our Protoss, by our Terran opponent. There we go. Get my tongue all mixed up there. Obviously going to be trying to get that economic advantage up until the point we see them push out. We're really not too worried, and we are prepared by moving our units here into somewhat of a forward position, preventing them from just running right into our expansion. And we're also going to see them if they try to go through this destructible debris here. Now taking a look back in our base, we have dropped a Robotics Bay, and in fact we did drop that at 47 supply. Now we're getting this because again we see that Marine Marauder build. Now, we got those Immortals for fending off any threat of early Marauders, but if we're really going to want to be able to handle that MMM ball, what we're going to need is one of 2 things. We're either going to need Colossi, or we're going to need High Templar. Now, there's pros and cons to both. Colossi are very, very strong versus Marines and Marauders, especially with that Thermal Lance upgrade. They can do devastating amounts of damage from far away. That they're susceptible to something like Vikings, an anti-air unit that does a pretty hefty amount of damage, so we'd have to be worried about Vikings. So that's kind of the drawback to Colossi. Now the other way to deal with that MMM ball is getting High Templar, but again what we would be susceptible at that point is to any Ghost, because Ghosts can do 2 things to High Templar. They can EMP, getting rid of all of their energy and their shields, and they can also snipe them. So those are 2 really big threats. Now again, with this Observer, we've been scouting our opponent, and what do we see? We see Ghost here. So in knowing that he has Ghost, our proper response is to get Colossi. That's what we're going to want to do. That's going to be the best thing. It's going to put us in the best situation. Again, if we were to see Vikings, then we'd probably want to think about getting High Templar. But since we saw Ghost, we're going to be getting those Colossi, and that's going to be the best way for us to deal with this MMM ball. Those Immortals were very strong against early Marauder pushes, but later on in the game it's not as beneficial as if you were to spend your gas on getting these Colossi. So that is exactly what we're going to be doing. So we do have this expansion up. We're working now on saturating it the best that we can. Using our Chrono Boost here to try to get these Colossi out as fast as possible. That was absurd, the fact that, oh my gosh, I don't know, it's been a long day. I just got back from work. I apologize. I did want to get up a good video for you guys. I've had a lot of Protoss players ask about how to deal with this MMM ball, so that's what I'm trying to cover today. So yeah, I mean, we have this pretty good default mix here of our Protoss ground army with these Zealots, these Stalkers, these Sentries. We also have these Immortals here doing very well against any Marauders, and these Colossi. This is going to really be our trump card. This is what's going to do best versus our Terran opponent's mix here of that Marine, Marauder, Medevac, and Ghost. Again, we saw those Ghosts, so we decided on those Colossi as opposed to the High Templar. Moving forward here to engage his army, he was pushing forward, trying to take down this destructible debris to hit our expansion. We were able to scout that thanks to our Observer, and as you can see, with these Colossi on the board, the damage we do to them is absolutely devastating. And even getting off that EMP, it wasn't enough to take out our army just because of all the damage we had supporting from this Colossi. Now we're going to try to push forward on his base, try to see what we can do. He does have a pretty good contingent force here with all those Marauders. That's a little bit threatening right now, but of course we can warp in units to provide some support here for our push. We're going to be trying to push forward. Our opponent does end up pushing out against us and using a stim pack, which is very threatening. We do want to pull away up until the point that that stim pack has subsided, getting a nice little force field off there. Really important to try to get good force fields. Push your opponents away from your forces up until the point that they lose that stim pack, and then at that point you can freely engage, of course. Now, since we still have yet to see any Vikings, we are going to be continuing our Colossi production, always a good idea. And now that we're on 2 bases, we can properly support additional warp gates, so we're going to be dropping down additional gateways as well. Getting Twilight Council for one of 2 things. Charged Zealots are going to be very strong against that Marine Marauder build, so getting that and upgrading that charge research for our Zealots is going to be very beneficial. Also, of course, we could get Blink Stalkers to do some Stalker micro and peel our Stalkers away as they get low. Now, we're going to be pushing forward right now at this point. We do see that our Protoss Terran opponent is trying to push forward and engage. Unfortunately, it is way too much for him to handle. With our Colossi here on the board, we were able to just completely mop them up. And yeah, there you go. I mean, as you can see, this mix of units here is going to do very well. I think the main point that I really want to drive home for you guys, for any Protoss players out there when trying to deal with that Marine Marauder ball, is, you know, you get your standard mix of units. You get the Zealots, the Sentries, and the Stalkers. That's pretty much default. But what you're going to get to specifically deal with that Marine Marauder and Medevac build is going to depend on what your opponent gets to complement it. If they're going for Ghost to complement that mix, if they're going for Ghost for that EMP, then your response is going to be to get these Colossi. Now, if you do see Vikings on the board, then you're going to want to skip the Colossi because they're going to be very susceptible to Viking fire, and you're instead going to want to go for some High Templar. So again, just go for that standard Warpgate build, get that robotics facility to deal with any early pressure from Marauders, and then from there decide if you want to go for Colossi or High Templar, depending on what your opponent's doing. I'm going to go over that build order real quick here, taking a look at what we saw. We started with that 9 Pylon, and we followed up with a 10 gateway in order to deal with any possible early Reaper harassment. I got an Assimilator at 13 supply, then a 15 supply. We got our Cybernetics Core. After that, we got out that Quick Stalker to get rid of that early Scout, and again, to deal with any possible Reapers. Now, 22 supply, we did get that Robotics Facility. At that point, we had seen a Marine and Marauder, so we thought that there was a good chance they would be going for that build. We pumped out our first Immortal. After that, we got our Observer for some good scouting information. In seeing the fact that they were going for that Marine Marauder build, we went ahead and we dropped down our Robotics Bay at 47 supply, and that allowed us to get out some Colossi. Of course, we got our Warpgate research and our second Assimilator at some point, and then we also went ahead and moved out to get our expansion when we felt we were comfortable and in a safe position with our army size and with the fact that it didn't look like they were going to push out anytime soon. So again, guys, this has been for StarCraft 2 Strategy. If you guys like our videos and you like what we're doing here, please do go ahead and subscribe to our channel. Keep watching and keep owning, guys. Go ahead and move your mothership to the side of their base and use the ability of that mass recall. As you can see right there, mass recalled all these units in his base, and we did bring some probes down because this is what I was talking about earlier. We're going to want to put some pylons inside of his base so that we're going to be able to warp in units as reinforcements.